Kali Tribune podcast. Once we establish that ego or pure I is the principle of everything that is, all knowledge and all reality insofar as that reality can be known, how is this possible? Namely, how the thing that is maybe the most transient phenomena one can imagine, that is to say, I, can be the principle of all, that by which is everything that is. In the previous episode, we talked about Johann Gottlieb Fichte, who more or less made this claim and made it relevant for all philosophers of later classical German idealism. But as I said previously, I don't think that this notion of system and notion of pure I or ego as metaphysical principle is confined to German idealism. Nothing can be further from the truth. I would claim that the whole of the modernity, if we understand modernity as a form of philosophy, worldview, ideology, or even metaphysics, is based upon the principle of ego. How come this happens? Because I think you would agree that there is something highly counterintuitive about it. Because that upon which is everything that is should not be something transient. No matter what modern and postmodern philosophers say about finitude of being or inexistence of any kind of eternal or infinite principles, there is something in us that just can't accept this. Philosophy, if it's worth its salt, will never abandon such intuition that arises in every mind when that mind gets in touch with some idea, and leave it unanalyzed, because such intuitions are in fact basis of philosophy. Not today and not maybe in the last 100 years, but originally they always were. So how can this come to pass? To answer this question, or at least give preliminary answer to it in the short confines of this podcast, we'll have to go one step back to Immanuel Kant. Namely, Immanuel Kant based his analysis of human cognitive capabilities, that are in fact the principles of reality as we experience it, reality as phenomena, is based on pure I. He was the first to give the clear outline of why this I is necessary, this ego, as a principle of all, but nevertheless left it curiously undefined. Now, what is the Kant's argument? As transcendental idealist, Kant assumes that all knowledge, that is to say, or experience, is contained in representations. Representations are mental, intellectual images that are synthesis of the sensuality of what is capable of being known by five senses and conceptual apparatus, so to speak. Because for Kant, our conceptual apparatus, which he calls categories of reason, is the system that makes things intelligible. We cannot know anything that is out of categories of reason. And those categories are not something that is inherent, the thing is in themselves, but it's something that consciousness or mind projects upon the world. World outside of categories and outside of senses is inconceivable to us. That is to say, to be more precise, it cannot be experienced by us. But nevertheless, and this is very interesting in Kant, it does exist. Kant claimed that things in themselves, things that don't appear to us because we have no capabilities of experiencing them, in fact do exist. But this will not be issue now. This was a great issue for German idealism because this was a glove in the face of those thinkers like Fichte and Hegel. What is important now is the place that ego plays in all this. Namely, is if all reality is experience, which Kant claims, then what makes this reality one experience? This is the question. And this is the question out of which the pure ego emerges. Now, when I say that reality equals experience, by this I mean that reality for Kant is always only phenomena. That is to say, something that appears to knowing subject. He works from this subject-object split, which is symptomatic for modern philosophy. And by the way, Kant is an ultimate modern philosopher. There is no understanding, in my opinion, of modernity without understanding Kant, at least in outline. And all attempts by later philosophers, especially those of Anglo-Saxon mold, to escape Kant's discoveries were futile, in my opinion. But that's the question and issue in itself. Namely, when Kant say that all reality is experience, that all reality is phenomena, what he wants to say is that you cannot speak about reality without speaking about the one that is experiencing this reality. Subject and object are separate, but also unified in the experience of reality as it is. We cannot know things in themselves. We cannot know things without us. We have to give account for the reality of both. But this account has to start from us, from the subject. Because in Kant's view, the subject and consciousness is the one that makes experience instead of incomprehensible chaos. And this experience is, or knowledge, which he calls it to some extent, he further defines as possible experience, because what Kant is interested in is conditions of the possibility of experience and knowledge, which equals conditions of possibility of reality itself, reality as we know it. And this also means for him reality that can be described by modern natural sciences. This is very important to understand. For instance, to just a moment to get back to Fichte, as I said in previous podcast, I gives the form to all knowledge, to all sciences. What makes them a system of one science, at least should make them such, gives them this potentiality, is this subjectivity that is at work in all knowledge. That is to say, mind discovers in nature something that he already put in it spontaneously and without self-reflection. Natural laws and such are based on subjective forms that are molding our experience, because everything we know comes in representations, and those representations are molded by us a priori. This cannot be escaped. But one very important thing, this does not mean that mind can transcend senses, that mind can transcend experience as described by natural sciences, most of all mechanics. Because when Fichte talks about science, he, among other things, takes example precisely from mechanics. Because both for Kant and for Fichte, and I would claim for later German idealists, the sensuality, the five senses are always the basis. Five senses are unified in what they call, in a German word, Anschauung, this intuition that is kind of like sensuality in general, sensuality that has intelligibility in it. And this is very important because some people think naturally when they start reading these philosophers that they are going to transcend, that they are going, at least those after Kant, over the boundaries of phenomenal. So, this is really not the case. In some instances it is. This is a long story, but they are all confined, in fact, to this boring reality of ours, which they are in fact trying to establish on different principles than the principles it is, in my opinion, actually established upon. Now, the problem is this: how can experience and therefore reality be one? As I said, what unifies sensual data and conceptual framework that Kant calls categories of pure reason, taking Aristotle's categories, traditional doctrine of categories, and putting it in the domain of consciousness, claiming that categories are in fact derived from consciousness and not found in things themselves. This is very important. What makes all of this one? How this sense experience is unified with concepts, those two disparate things, because sense experience is something we see, we smell, we hear, but how all those individual instances of smelling, hearing, and whatever, seeing, come under categories. How can this spontaneously become conceptualized in a way that we cannot perceive the world without world already being intelligible, conceptual? By conceptual, I mean that you have to, when you reflect, without any education, without any schooling, when you are thinking about the world, reflecting upon your experience, you think in categories of that something is substantial, that something is accidental, that something has a cause, that something is effect of some cause. Those are all categories for Kant. So how those two things merge into one experience? And Kant's answer was, and I will make it short because this is the most difficult part of Kant, his so-called deduction of categories of reason, transcendental deduction, that is. They are all unified because all experience is unified, and all knowledge and all reality, because all representations refer to one who has them. That is to say, to me. This is what Kant calls transcendental apperception. And this is the phenomena that he never really explains what it is. He never gives a definition in the sense that you might decide whether this transcendental subjectivity is you and me, or something that exists separate of us, or that it is in some kind of way both. And the reason why he cannot do this is precisely it comes from the nature of the pure ego as principle, because it is and it is not at the same time. This is how I see it. He saw it differently. He said that pure I is not anything that can be experienced because it is not phenomena. It is what is at the bedrock of phenomena. All phenomena are related to it in a form of representations. So you have to, in order to see a world as a whole, to have this spontaneous experience of existing and knowing, you always have to refer it to I. Therefore, I have been here from forever. As long as there is a world, there is an I that knows this world, and makes it one unified experience. Let's put it in this way. And out of that flow many different interpretations, from German idealist to Schopenhauer and so on and so forth. And I would claim, and there is an unfinished podcast of mine on the subject, this is crucial for understanding posthumanism, because posthumanism works on this assumption. By posthumanism I mean a lot of things, but that are subsumed under the idea that human can be transcended. Humanity can be transcended precisely through affirmation of pure ego at expense of human nature. But that's a different question. So how this pure I plays into an idea of system? Well, the system is a form of absolute knowledge. That is to say, the knowledge that is whole, one knowledge. As there is one reality, there should be, at least potentially, one unified idea of knowledge of reality. Remember from the first podcast when we talked about what Kant calls architectonics of the pure mind. System is a variety of knowledge, different kinds of knowledge subsumed under one idea. What is this idea? This idea is I, pure I, and pure ego is the principle of system building. In German idealism, I don't really think, for those who are in the know about this period in history of philosophy, I think have to argue this point, because it is clear. They made it clear, Hegel especially, I would say. But I think this applies much further from the confines of this German philosophy. It applies to scientism in general, it applies to politics today, and so on and so forth. Why is I important in this sense? Why it is necessary for system? Because system is not simply the whole of knowledge and the whole of reality. It is the whole that is completely transparent. So assumption is that you can have, at least potentially, knowledge of everything. And how is this possible? Because reality is based upon you. To put it as bluntly as I can, to make an argument that may appear weak to somebody philosophically educated, but it's in fact, I think, irrefutable. Ego is being of beings. Now, what this means? Now I'll try to get back to tradition, to give contrast, to put Kant in a distant mirror, to put this principle of I, of ego, who loves mirrors, by the way, in the proper mirror, so we can see how distorted its face is. Being is not a real predicate, so says Kant. What does this mean? This means the traditional term that is expression of the wholeness of creation, or wholeness of beings, of that which is one in many, in all things, that is present in all things, making them one, isn't flatus voces. It is empty wind. There is nothing, no content to this word. It is a logical term that can be used as applied as a limitation in thinking, limitations in logica, for instance, tautologies, things that are always true. For instance, A is A, which is just, as moderns would say, tautology. It means nothing, but it has to exist in order that you know, when you come to with your real inferences about things, you come to this point of tautology and say, I cannot go further in my line of reasoning. That's where Kant puts being, the main and principal philosophical issue and metaphysical principle, in fact. And he says it doesn't exist. There doesn't exist some I don't know, transcendent thing that makes everything real, that makes all reality a reality. And what he does then, he puts it in our own selves. Because the function of being is the oneness in unity. And what we said about transcendental perception or the pure ego, it is the principle of unity of experience equals principle of unity of reality. What Kant did is take being from the wholeness of the world, where there is no subject-object split, where both men, indeed in Middle Ages angels also, animals, things, everything is as one whole that is differentiated and hierarchically differentiated. In traditional metaphysics, one thing is better than another. This is very important in traditional notion of being. There is always a hierarchy. And he took this, turned whole history of philosophy on its head and science on its head, to put experience, everyday intuition on its head, and started from that. Started all over again, all over. Started new epoch, and I would say he really did. I think he's the most important thinker of modern age. And you really have to have to understand, at least in outline, what Kant thinks in order to give a context to the whole plethora of phenomena we are wrestling now, from LGBTIQ, which I subsume under posthumanism, posthumanist proposition, and, for instance, sustainable development, which is also system-based ontology and politics and so on. These are not abstract things, but their principles, their origins are very deep in human, let's say, very deep in human spirit, in human thinking, in the age where thinking and ideas played explicit and crucial part in the world, which is now also the case, in fact, but not so obviously, let's say. So what is then the property of the system? Well, the property of the system, if system is built upon pure I, potentially everything can be known. And everything can be made transparent, external to this I, like something that it can watch and read, like a spreadsheet of Excel or something like that. This is the system. This is systematic knowledge. Traditional metaphysics does not see knowledge nor reality like this. As I already said, and this is the main thing, the principle, what is real principle of metaphysics, has been shifted in the confines of human consciousness. And not only human consciousness, by the way, because consciousness is a much wider term than human consciousness, but in Kant's age, one could still be humanist. Today, humanism is impossible, because humanism in the end endeavors itself and ends up in transhumanism. But that's, of course, a question in itself. I cannot go into that now. Let us just make mental footnote, because I love footnotes. And if you don't like footnotes, I cannot help you. I like making them and reading them, even mental and audio ones. Anyway, what is the difference? I will finish this podcast with illustration, which I promised in the first episode. Now, when you read Aristotle, one thing you'll notice very soon, if you're really into him, if you're really trying to understand what he's saying, that he's using terms, for instance, terms substance, ousia, or a term like matter or subject, hypokeimenon, in contradictory manner, apparently contradictory manner. Once he will call matter substance, once he will call it form, although substance is primarily a form. Once subject is this, subject is something completely opposite, sometimes in the same passage. That's why people find it hard to understand him. However, there is other sentiment you get when you read this. You don't have a feeling he's contradicting himself. Now, how is this possible? Is it because the word is used in different contexts, which is common sense explanation? So in one context, he is talking about substance as a form, in another substance as matter, which is common sense and which is the easier thing to assume, but this is not the case, I believe. You know what happens in Aristotle? He's talking about the whole. He's talking about being. He is the founder of metaphysics in a sense we understand it now as traditional metaphysics. In my opinion, this metaphysics of Aristotle is developed completely in conjunction with Plato and Platonism, although this is not also apparent knowing if we know how much criticism Aristotle in his preserved treatises levels on Plato. But the logic, Aristotle's logic also is very Platonic. That's what I want to say. Nevertheless, this is not the issue now. What happens in Aristotle is that he cannot have the wholeness that he is trying to depict or think, transparent as a system. He has it in analogies. And analogies, in a very strict sense of the word, I'm using using this word in the sense Thomas Aquinas would use it. Aristotle would not use it. He called it pros hen legomena. He relies on assumption that everything, all things that are said in the same manner, the same name, are said according to one perfect instance. So we say, this is example from Aristotle used in Middle Ages later. For urine, we said it's healthy. For instance, we say for medical procedure that it's healthy. We say for someone's appearance that it's healthy. What is unifying these senses of healthy? Health itself. That is to say, either health itself, this is Platonic answer, but Aristotle would say the instance of the pure healthiness as a form of act, of energeia. Everything is said in the same way, in the unified way, according to one first instance, which has this quality in essential way, but the other instances have that quality by participation, that is to say, in a partial way. There is a meaning of substance that is absolute and first, and all other meanings are related to it. And this is how Aristotle thinks. This is how he writes. And this is what plethora of academics of the highest order for some reason don't get. They learn Greek, they study Aristotle for the whole of their lives, and they don't see this, which I find utterly amazing. This difference in the way of thinking of somebody like Kant or Bertrand Russell, if you like, or Wittgenstein or Heidegger, or anyone of those guys, and this philosopher of tradition of antiquity, the form, the way, they don't look at the way he speaks, the way he writes, in which you see that his metaphysical principle, the principle of being, as the first instance upon which all instances of things that are said in accordance with, that he applies this to his very form of expression. And this form of expression does not work on the basis of system, because it does not work on the basis of pure ego. This means that in Aristotle, you always have this whole of reality that is assumed. It is there. You have an answer to question hoti in Greek. This means answer to question if it is. Hoti, by the way, means that it is. This is the Greek word for what was later expressed in modern philosophy as existence. You know of its existence, you don't know its essence. You cannot lay it out as a system that can be then manipulated, that can be then used to reform something, that can be, in a word, in your power. It is not in your power, because you're not creator of reality. Ego, pure I, is understood as potential creator of reality. Even more, creator of the possibility of reality. This is the most crucial, most important point. And to leave this podcast as a cliffhanger for eternity, because there will be no third part, that's where I finish, because this is only giving an outline of the problem, whereas those who follow Kali Tribune know that I write quite a lot about this problem. I consider it crucial, and the acme of the problems of philosophy. It's a problem of everything, a problem of everybody, believe me when I tell you. But its core is to be found in metaphysics, the ultimate science, which still exists. Whatever people speak about it, or saying that this metaphysics is something that is a relic of the past and so on. Well, like hell it is. Posthumanism is a pure metaphysics. LGBTIQ is metaphysica generalis, specialis of posthumanism. So I don't buy that crap. Neither should you. And on that note, thank you for your attention. This was Branko Malic of Kali Tribune.